Welcome everyone back to the Pommy in Oz channel, and I'm joined by good mate of mine, good mate of yours, Collingwood icon and legend, the Scott Pendlebury of Collingwood Tube, Swoop. Luke. How you doing, mate?
Good, mate. How you going, Pom?
Hey, mate, I'm always good. Always good to see you, Swoop. I enjoy these little collabs.
It's always fun, mate. Thank you for having me on. No stranger that you're one of my favorites on here. So, if not the favorite on here, so it's a privilege to come onto your channel, mate.
Hey, mate, it's a privilege having you. Well, I mean, let's get straight into it. Collingwood last year, the reigning premiers. We know how hard it is to back it up. Obviously, in the end, from an outside looking in, I think 9th was probably a fair result with your season of how your form was. But initial vibes, like just as the season is done and dusted now, probably a few missed opportunities there. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I guess after the dust settles, when you miss out on a final spot by either a game, half a game, or a couple of percentage points, you do spew, because then you go into like what ifisms, and they eat you up, right? Like we know all about what ifs and how much they affect your mental health and just affect you as a supporter. But after these last couple of months, dust settling, 9th is probably about what we deserved, and people will say, it was the Fremantle game because there was that free kick and stuff. But we lost we started the season 0-3. We came off the bye 0-4. So we won like 4 of our last 5 games. But when you've got 2 patches of games, 2 patches of parts of your season where you should be technically your freshest after a bye and at the start of the season, to start really slow and come off that bye really slow, that did hinder us. Finished the season well, which was amazing. That was probably the best part of last season. And I'm just very, very excited for 2025.
You had moments last year, like from the outside looking in, where like injuries probably really curtailed you. But one real positive for me was seeing Nick Dacos switch from the marauding halfback flanker to being a full-time inside mid, and had a spectacular year. We saw a change of Scott Pendlebury's role. We saw a change of Josh Dacos's role off halfback. Like your initial vibes as the season ended, what were your positives for 2024 going into this year?
Well, look, at the start of the year, I even said it as well, like we're probably well placed to go back to back, and everyone had us back into the grand final. And then, injuries happen, and I know injuries happen to all sort of teams. At one point, we had 17 on the injury list. But I like to, over these last couple of years, in my older age, I've started looking at the glass half full. And with injuries, we got to see more of the young kids. We had Ned Longday. We had 9 black and white debutants, not just first gamers, but guys from other sides. So Ned Long, we saw a little bit of TJ, Ed Allen had a breakout game against Melbourne his last game. So did Will Parker. So they played 2 games last season. So these guys, maybe not Ed Allen, but like Will Parker, TJ, Ned Long, Lockie Sullivan, these guys aren't playing like if you have a full team and a premiership team ready to go. So we got to look at that. And we talked a little bit about it off air, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about it in a second. But that's those young guys sort of coming up, those mature ages ready to go. And it was good, seeing Lockie Sullivan, Ned Long, these guys go about it. So that was a big positive. I liked Steele Sidebottom's role change. So like he came off he was having a shit year, came off the half back line, did really well. Then he was chucked into the middle as a tagger. He did incredible there. So there's a new lease on life for him. Pendlebury's just getting better. And, Nick Dacos, I'm running out of like things to say about him, but you only have to look so far as to say he amassed more Brownlow votes than anyone has in the history besides Patrick Cripps in the same year. So like, how does that happen? How does that happen? It's because he goes into the midfield, because he has a fantastic year. And he did all of that without a proper inside mid. He did all of that without Titch to shovel him the ball. So we use the analogy a lot, you and I, that you wouldn't drive a Ferrari through Broady, but he was that Ferrari going down in Broady. He was driving to Frankston. He was going to St Kilda Beach. He was doing all the dirty work and getting the reward for it.
Mate, I think you nailed it. And I think the big problem that I saw was Nick Dacos leaving the halfback line kind of stopped that wonderful transition that we saw the year before. Now, that leads me on to my next point. At the end of the season, everyone was saying old Collingwood, oldest list last year. I think most people's perception was there's going to be a point Collingwood have to hit the draft. And Lepich came out. He kind of doubled down with McRae. We're going for ready-made talent. We're sticking with the task.
Yep.
Cal and my team, on the other hand, people were thinking they're in the window. And I feel like we've got a wonderful little story curtailing. Carlton went hard at the draft. You guys went hard at established talent.
Yep.
And a certain Mr. Dan Houston came in, who is probably as close as you can find to Nick Dacos down the back line. What were your initial thoughts about doubling down on age? And two, what do you think Dan Houston brings to the Magpie Army?
Mate, I think, premiership windows don't open up very often, right? A premiership window is like opening a window in Canada in the middle of winter. You're not gonna fucking do it. It doesn't come around a lot, right? So when you can open it, that means that the weather's good. You're going to keep it open for as long as you can, and topping up with these players and going for players, not picks. I love that Craig McRae came out and said that. I love that. You don't really get that honesty from a lot of coaches and people from the club. For him to say, pretty much fuck picks, man. Let's just get some ready-made talent in there. Let's just get some guys that have been in the system for 7, 8, 9, 10 years to help us. We're in the process of getting better. The window's open now. You bring in Tim Membry, who wanted to play for Collingwood as a delisted free agent. It costs you nothing, right? Besides whatever it is, $250, let's just say. You bring in Harry Perryman, who I reckon is going to be one of the steals of the trade period or free agency period, whatever you want to call it. Because he's that Swiss Army knife, like the Will Hoskin-Elliott type. And people forget that he's been at the Giants for 8 years because he was an unrestricted free agent. So he's had that time to grow. Tall guy, big guy, vocal guy. And then, the crux of the point is Dan Houston. And so the Dan Houston news was sort of breaking while I was over in Europe, and it was hard to keep up at times, but it got me through some dark days being alone in Europe. But I say it to anyone that listens, and I said it to you on the phone call the other day. Carlton pick up Dan Houston, and to me, they're premiership favourites going into next year. But Collingwood picking up Dan Houston, and like you just said, it's Nick Dacos off the half back line. Like, he'll go into the centre a little bit, Dan, but it's like having Nick Dacos back on that half back line, 2-time All-Australian, the best, probably one of if not the best halfbacker in the league, and you can let Nick Dacos do what he wants. He's not going to have to play two roles anymore. They'll switch, but it's tantalising, mate. It's absolutely tantalising.
It is interesting because I think the common misconception with your list is it's really old. It's going to die in the next year. And I think when we actually look at it properly, I always consider anyone over 30 old. That's where I'm looking at replacements. So that would open up Crisp, Hoskin, Elliott, Mitchell, Meyercheck, Elliott, Cox, Sidebottom, Howe, and Pendlebury. And I think Pendlebury's the anomaly because he's like Cristiano Ronaldo. He should be retired, but he's still there. But I would look at your list and still think you've got babies coming through that will ultimately replace them. Like, we haven't seen Harry Di Matteo, and he's one of the hotly touted in his draft class. I think you've got Jacob Ryan there as well. TJ, you mentioned, Ed Allen. These are all 20-year-old babies who are still learning off these guys. When you look at your list, particularly the draft this year, West, Cochrane and Hayes, I think you've still got ready-made replacements, but you've bought them time, which I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's I think two things can be right? So we're the oldest list in AFL history going forward now, and that's because you have a 37-year-old playing for you, and whatever Steele is, 34 maybe, 33, 34. So they're old, right? Well, not too. I'm 32, so they're not that old, but like, you know what I mean. So that takes you up, and to get players Dan Houston and Perryman's age, which I think might be 27, 28, is that sort of middle gap. And you're right, it does help. It does help the guys that are younger and that are coming through. And like I said earlier, last year because of those injuries, we had to play these young guys, and you could see the Western Bulldogs game, the Sydney game, the Fremantle game. These young players towards the end of the last quarter, they're just dying, out there. So, they were thrown into the deep end. So now you've got these guys in that middle sort of bracket, and then a couple more years into like Nick and Josh and stuff like that can keep going, and you can develop those guys. Ed Allen's been on the list for, I want to say the better part of 3 or this might be his 4th year, I think, 3 or 4 years. And he just debuted last year. But I remember that when we signed him, when we drafted him, that summer, we extended his contract for another 2 years. So they know what they're doing. We do have that talent coming through. It's just when the window is open, you're gonna breathe that air. You have to breathe that air.
Mate, I think you nailed it. And I think what I enjoyed this year about your off-season is Lepic took that job over from Graham Wright, who he crossed the floor. He crossed the floor to us. I thought it was an impressive off-season in the terms of Lepic stamped his mark. And I think that's really important. I think like Matt Roses at Essendon as well, there was a clear change in the model of the old guy. And it's like, this is my list. This is what we're doing. Briefly, before we move on to 2025, did want to talk about Charlie West. I love Charlie West in the draft. I've already earmarked that as potentially the steal of the draft because he was playing for the Torrens. We know Tyler Welsh was there, so that was where the focus was. I think Charlie West had a great year. I think learning off Brody Myercheck and Tim Membry, I think is key to what Collingwood want because he's probably the most consistent second forward in AFL decade. In the last decade, he's been that wingman type to the main guy throughout his career. How excited are you that you've brought in probably now the hardest working key forwards in the league? You've got Brody Myercheck and Membry, and Charlie West is going to be like a sponge, learning off two of the most maximum talent getters in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that it's incredible that we drafted a key forward and a key back. Like, that's unheard of. And that's, like you said, it's the changing of the guards, It's, Derek Hine and Wright and stuff. We finally, we get a key forward in. And I think I did a video about it, not a video about it, but I mentioned it in a video where we don't have any forward depth, like tall forward depth. The only guy is Ash Johnson, and there's no one younger than him. So this is huge for Charlie West. He looks a big boy. He reminds me a lot, like you said, of Myercheck. Even his build, his legs are like absolute tree trunks. But a guy that you haven't mentioned, who is also learning off, is Dan McStay, a bit of the forgotten man as well. And a forward line of McStay, Membry, Myercheck, because obviously Membry and Myercheck are getting older in age. Charlie West is just going to eat it all up. And out of the 3 debutants, he's probably the one that could come through, especially with Cox. This will probably be Cox's last year. I don't know about Myercheck, but maybe Myercheck's last year as well. So West is best. He's going to be absolutely phenomenal. I've been watching him at training these last couple of weeks. Good hands. Like I said, big boy. I want to see what he can do in the VFL. And now we've got an actual big forward target in the VFL as well.
Mate, I love it. And going into next year, obviously, I think this year's draft as well was overshrouded by what could have been for Collingwood with Lachie Schultz. I did briefly want to touch on, how are you viewing that Schultz trade? Because I looked at his year and I don't quite understand what people are complaining about. I think it could have been better, but I think if you look at Lachie Schultz, it's well in the purviews of AFL average for his position anyway. I feel like he's probably getting a lot of stick, unnecessary, change of game plan. He's moved into state. I'm expecting quite a big year from Lachie Schultz because I think he's really going to blow out next year and show people how good he can be.
Yeah, I love Lachie, right? And people, this is what I hate about football, like football commentary and football, supporters and stuff. And I'm guilty of it as well at times. I'm not fucking Jesus Christ himself, but like, that Lachie Schultz trade looks amazing if we finish first and second like we were supposed to. 100%. You're giving up pick 18 for him. And like, oh no, now we've given up. What did it end up being? Pick 12, pick 13 maybe?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a first rounder basically.
Yeah, so like
mid first rounder.
Yeah, so you give up that for him, and people are like, oh, and now we're fourth last. We're giving up pick 7 for him. It's like, well, we weren't supposed to. No one saw us having 17 injuries at one stage. And then obviously Ginnivan goes to Hawthorn. That's who we sort of push out, and Lockie Schultz come in. Two totally different players. And Ginnivan had a great year at Hawthorn. Hawthorn had a year that no one was expecting. No one was expecting a year like that from Hawthorn, and no one was expecting Ginnivan to do that. But with Sam Mitchell and that younger sort of brigade, that he allowed them to breathe, and that's awesome. That's awesome for there. So comparing Ginnivan to Schultz's year is apples and oranges. But Schultz himself, he's touted for his defensive pressure, his defensive role. He's like a Bo McCreary, except he kicks more goals. So everything that he brought, and I'm pretty sure he's ranked elite amongst small forwards for tackles in the defensive 50 and just tackles in general. Complements Bobby really well. And I think, what did he kick? 25 or something goals? I know it was under 30 goals? Because I think Bobby kicked 30.
Yeah, it was, yeah. It was the 24 mark.
Yeah. So I envision him kicking 30, 35 next year, now that he knows what his role is. And, you come to Collingwood, you come to Carlton, you come to Essendon, the spotlight's on you straight away. You pick your nose while you're lining up for goal, you won't see the end of it. Like, you won't. It'll go viral on TikTok. You know what I mean? So, but you pick your ass while you're playing for Fremantle. No one fucking cares. So,
true.
You know what I mean? So, it comes with the territory, and he did have a couple of, he stopped his Instagram for a little bit because he was just talking shit, and which isn't on. But I love Lockie. I love everything that he does. And yeah, you're right. He's going to be one of the top 5 guys from Collingwood that just go that extra mile next year.
And moving into 2025, what are Collingwood's expectations? Obviously, I think it's quiet and down now. I always think the worst position to be in is the flag winner, because we're already seeing it with Brisbane. You're kind of penciled in going back to back, but we know how hard it is to go back to back. I think everyone got up for Collingwood last year. Everyone wanted to knock them off, particularly early, because you kind of get to go back in the shed saying we've just beat the Premiers.
Yeah.
What are you looking for as a Collingwood fan? Like, what is the minimum expectation you're looking for this group, and what are you hoping for?
So, I'll start with hoping. I'm hoping for a flag. Like, I think this is the 2023 Premiership team minus Ginnivan, minus Murphy. You have Reef McGuinness possibly playing Murphy's role, and you got to remember that Murphy couldn't kick, couldn't handball. He was just not helmet on, but because he never wore a helmet, but like helmet on, just smashing into contests and creating space for Darcy Moore to do his thing. You put another player that can do that, incredible, right? And then you add a two-time All-Australian halfback. You add Perryman, who's a younger version of Will Hoskin-Elliott that can do his role. You've added 3 players that make the 2023 Premiership team better. So my minimum is a grand final appearance, but I think the club would say at least bare minimum is top 4. Like anything other than top 4, and not saying that a top 8 is a fail, but you want that double chance. So anything other than a top 4 finish, realistically, I think would be what they wouldn't want.
Swoop, I think you're one team to watch this year. I think the media narrative is very peculiar around both of our clubs at the minute. You can see that they're not quite sure whether to pan us or make us premiers already. But Swoop, always a pleasure. What have you got on in the off-season? All your links are in the description. What have you got on for the rest of the year for people to enjoy?
Yeah, so I'm just now that I'm trying to do this bloody thing full time, I'm getting to training 3 times a week. So I'm at training all the time. So if you want to watch Collingwood train and you hear me talk about Collingwood training, there's that. I'm starting to do a lot of long form content now. I will be starting to do long form content. So like mini docos, I'm working on one that's the 2002 grand final. If they start to pop off, I might start doing ones for other teams and stuff, because that's something that I love. I love storytelling. What else am I doing? I'm going to the gym more. I've lost 12 kilos. I'm running more. I'm going to do a half marathon next year. No, it's good. Pom, I'm the fittest, healthiest, and happiest I've been in, I reckon, all my life. So I can't wipe this smile off my face, even if Carlton knock us off twice next year, mate.
Mate, I love that from you. Well, Swoop, mate, always a pleasure, never a chore. I'll chat to you soon, but make sure you go and check Swoop out. good friend of the channel, good friend of mine. So go and give him some love. And we'll be back next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pommy. Thanks, guys. Love yous.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella